Now this is part 4 of making the RD seat cowl. We've had the part drying in prime overnight. Now with primer it's now pretty obvious. Now I just put this picture on here for a reason. This is the old style seat cowl where you really had about a 6-inch hump in the back to slide back into when the bike wheelied or accelerated. I didn't want to have it that big. I was looking like the part I made for the Suzuki, an inch, inch and a half, and plenty wide hanging out over the end of the seat, because as you hang off the bike, if this part is narrow, it defeats the whole purpose. It's got to hang out past where the seat ends. So I was very careful in trying to, and the word trying here is important, trying to design something that met all my criteria. What's great is this time of year the heat is on perpetually, and so the parts dry up there as if they're baked in an oven. The next day, to get out some wet sandpaper, 600, and basically just wet sand down this primer. I could put as many coats as I need to on here. It really won't matter. It's not like a model plane where you have to keep the finish light. That's one of the advantages of doing it this way. Keep the sandpaper plenty wet, keep flushing it out, and keep replacing the water with fresh water. And I've been giving Larry lessons in doing the painting. He's getting to be relatively competent. It won't be long before he'll be doing all the work on his track bike, and I'm sure it'll come out looking beautiful. But this is one part that I've been trying to show Larry step by step as we work on this. Use it as a way he can pick up some information too. And again, the only tricks that I've learned here, real simple. Put a lot of primer on, rub it in, let it dry overnight. Whenever I sand it without letting it dry overnight, it turns to chewing gum. Doesn't really sand the way I like it. And you can see that the weave of the cloth coming through there, so you know that's about all you can sand without putting any more primer on. And that's about what it normally would look like on the high spots. But even that, it's just a question in my case of being patient. Now if we were making this part from a mold, the skin would already be on it, and we'd be making the part from the outside in. In this case we're making it from the inside out, but there's a lot of advantages to doing it this way when you're going to make one part. But the disadvantage is you've got to put the finish on it. Where normally the other way, you have to make the plug, so you really don't skip anything. And in this case, we don't have to make a mold at all. And by doing it this way, what hopefully is going to happen, we're going to have one very unique part. And if we wanted to make another one, you know, or if somebody else out there wants to make one, you could certainly copy this and go right through this. But what this is, it's almost no money on it. To make this part, it almost takes no money. But again, you know, it's a one-of-a-kind part, and that's what I'm looking for more than anything else. And I want to have this part wide. Now what I've found is, I found this out with the Suzuki too, by having this wide, when you're leaning off the bike, you're bumping into it right here. When this is narrow at the top, like a modern sport bike, the problem is right here. You're not hitting anything. You can't really use it to your advantage. And that's one of the reasons I think why the big butt seat is so wide up here. And Luciano's was really wide. It was even wider than this. It was probably another 2 or 3 inches. So, but it does have, by looking at it here, I can see it does have the look I kind of was looking for. Except it's a little bit of a combination of the stock seat, which is very comfortable, the part of the seat the rider would normally use, and then this extended piece, which this should look very unique when it's on the bike. I'm sure once it's on the bike, we'll see. Now I can pull this out anytime I want. That wood I'm done with. That was the side grain, end grain wood. That can just get pulled out. I want to clean that trough out. There's a little trough in there. I want to clean out any of the residue that's in there, because that piece, by staying in there, is going to maintain that curvature. That's what maintains that curve, helps maintain it anyway. Now this is the difficult part, is getting this radius right here. This radius has to match the seat. This radius has to match this. This has to fill in here so we don't have a gap or a very big gap. Now by making that, I want to slide the part in. I want to get it to almost where it's going to be, and then I need to figure out how much of that foam I'm going to cut off of there. Because by taking that foam off, now I can see it just slides in under the rails the way I wanted. I can sand this down. I can get ready. I have to put some side pieces in here. Again, hard balsa, rock hard balsa. Also, now I got a stress riser right in that corner. So to cure that stress riser, I'm going to make that radius out of balsa and then lay that whole thing in with epoxy and carbon fiber. So I can, now see the grain, I want the grain to go corner to corner. I don't want the grain going this way or straight up and down. I want it going corner to corner. So I trace that part out on some 3/8 balsa. Take it over to the saw. Leave the dust on. Don't take the dust off. The dust helps kick off the CA. It gives me a rough corner. Now I have to figure out what that radius is, little by little. I just happen to find once those corners were in that the kicker bottle was pretty close to the radius I wanted. I had some little gaps to fill in at the bottom. Just fill them in with rock hard balsa. It'll just make doing a Bondo part of this a little easier. And again, I traced that out using the seat as a pattern, a rough pattern anyway, but then it was the kicker bottle that's going to give me that shape. And just having that, even if it wasn't exactly right, it's a good starting point. And then just using that to get in there and get a nice radius. And then of course testing it on a seat to see if it's too big or too small. Once I get the radius right, I'll harden up all these edges with thin CA, several coats. Took some carbon fiber tow. By the way, that's a full roll of carbon fiber tow. Left over from the days of modeling when we made propellers. That's the material you would use to make carbon fiber propellers. So I know by using some 5-minute epoxy, a heat gun, I can fill that whole corner with carbon fiber. That'll be hopefully keep the paint from cracking. A little bit of the Bondo. And again, what's nice about this, 2 minutes up by the heating vent and it's ready to sand. Once that's block sanded out, and again, it goes relatively quickly. From this point on, we're detailing this out little by little by little by little, block sanding it out, filling in the little rough spots with the glazing putty. But as I looked at it from this point on, and what I was thinking in the very beginning, I was going to make this look radiused at the top, make this out of a block. But the problem I learned, and I learned it the hard way, is the most important part of this is to have this corner here as you're sliding off the side of the bike, because you're always going to the inside of the turn. It was really good having this like this. So now I assume what's going to happen, the paint is going to wear off the front of this. So when I put the clear on, I'll try to put plenty of extra clear on the front of this so I can keep rubbing out the scratches, or maybe make one of those little carbon fiber pads like you have on the front of the tank and the back of the tank. We'll see how that works out. Anyway, the glazing putty, this is pretty cut and dry. Stick it up by the heating vent, have a cup of coffee, and wet sand it out. Now I know it would even be easier if we were in the summer, we could be working outside, but since it was about 25 degrees this day, I was real happy to work inside the shop. Again, wet sanding it out. This stuff really wet sands out real nice. All of the little spots on it, it's very, very easy to deal with. I do most of this by feel, just feel for the high spots, the low spots. What was really important is I wanted to get this radius. And when it's too much of a radius, the part starts, I didn't want it to look like too round, and I wanted to have kind of edges, kind of an edgy part, but I wanted this to taper back, so your real big butt doesn't taper back. I thought this would be cool, and then right at the bottom of this I can put my license plate and my tail light underneath on a piece of carbon, because I want to eliminate the back fender. And that bracket that holds the blinkers, I have a couple ideas of how I can eliminate all that stuff and knock another 4 or 5 pounds off the bike, that's for sure. So I got my edge. This is nice. That's going to work out fine. Now I still have to decide how much of that foam has to come off of there, because we're never going to go back to using it. So the way we do that is get out to the garage and take out, I always call this my murderer's row here. Take out the RD. The seat comes off with 2 pins. It just comes right off. And you pretty much have to have a seat that opens up easily, because you have to fill the oil tank every couple times you ride the bike with 2-stroke oil. And I wanted to, this is the most critical part of the whole thing. When I paint this, the Yamaha striping, it's got to pretty much be parallel. I want it to be parallel. So it wouldn't be parallel if we tried to. At one time I thought I'd try to leave the tail light on and the fender, and I said, oh, and the blinkers over here. It's really going to look like, I don't know, it's something that I don't like. And these compromises, when you make the compromise, sometimes you're sorry you didn't just do it right the first time. So anyway, it's time to bite the bullet. I know I have to take the fender off. I got to relocate the blinkers. I have to get a tail light and make a carbon fiber piece. But I can't do any of that until I have the seat cowl finished. Now another thing, right at this point, I went out and got a plastic dumpster out of my little, I call it a bucket. And from that bucket, I take all of the parts that are coming off the bike, the fender, the blinkers, the tail light, will go in that bucket. So when I want to put the bike back to stock, I have all the bolts, all the rubber washers, the wiring, whatever it would take to put the bike back to totally stock. Now here, I realized right away one of the problems is I couldn't get this to go down. See, I want to have a parallel line. And I have to cut the back off of the seat, which I didn't know how much I had to cut off until I did the mock-up here. I didn't know how much. But this is still too high. And it'll look totally different when I paint the stripe. So my original thing was I was going to take the whole seat cover off, and I said, I don't really have to do that right now. And since I'm never going to use this, if I go to put a double seat back on it, I'll just use the stock seat. So I want to little by little trim off some of this foam using one of Karen's good knives, which she doesn't know I have. And I did it in increments until I got the angle that I wanted. Run out to the garage, check the angle. Run out to the garage, check the angle. Run out to the garage, check the angle. Run out to the garage, and I eventually got what I thought was going to be good. The seat tucks right in. It holds in here. Of course, I have to make brackets for everything, and I have to make this detachable, which is, that'll be another challenge for another day. But we'll have plenty of places to mount that taillight mount. And I found a really tricked out place to mount the blinkers, because I wanted to use the stock blinkers. I don't want to have the little baby LED blinkers. And I wound up, believe it or not, I had to cut all the foam off, but now it gave me a nice rock hard place to mount the seat. So now there'll be no vibration in that seat at all. It normally would have been mounted with the back end touching rubber. Now that eliminates that possibility. And when I went out and did the final thing, I have exactly the parallel line I wanted. I was just thrilled to death here. I just couldn't be happier. Because now I'll be able to get the last coat of primer on, put that up to dry overnight. Once that dries overnight, I'll be able to paint the white. And tomorrow morning when I come down, I'll be one happy camper. And then we'll be ready to go on to part 5 tomorrow.